It is so I cannot explain to you how excited I am to have this conversation just from the combination of this movie's incredible. We'll start with that. Destroy All
Thank you.
Neighbors is a fantastic kickoff to the 2024 horror season in my mind. Um, and I have a lot of questions about that, but I also
Yeah.
on top of doing a horror movie podcast, I do a bunch of music podcasts, and
Okay.
you have this incredible career as a music video director as well that I would love to dive into. This movie's so much about music. I
Yeah,
feel like we've
man.
got a million directions to go.
Let's do it. Let's do everything everywhere all at once.
Yes, that's
Oh
my
wait, different
plan.
movie.
It's well, I want to start with talking about the look and the feel of this movie. I want to try to discuss this movie without discussing too much of this movie because you
hmm
have so many fun twists or turns. I don't want to spoil them for the people
For
listening, but I
sure.
want to convince people to check it out.
Yeah.
And you cast Alex Winter in this movie looking almost nothing like Alex Winter throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
And the vibe and the humor made me have to start with, how big of a fan of the movie Freaked are you?
Oh, massive. Yeah. I would show off my freak shirt, but I wore it out yesterday. I love Freaked. I mean, that was one of the big reasons why we reached out to Alex. Like, Jonah had an office like a across an alleyway from Alex's office, and so as we were sort of like, you know, working on the script, we just would kind of fantasize, like, who really gets this, who really would understand this is Alex Winter. Like, man, if only maybe if he would just read it and give us some notes or something. Like, we just wanted to like have him wave his hand over the script or something, just like
Yeah.
to get some of that freaked mojo. And then lo and behold, I think it was during the pandemic where Jonah was just like, screw it, I'm just gonna ask him to read
Yeah.
it.
Well,
And
and
yeah,
I mean, you have that energy. The way I was explaining it to a lot of people was like, think of movies like Freaked and Dead Alive, but inject it with like a incredible prog rock soundtrack from Man and
uh-huh.
like all this, like it's almost like this giant blender of all these things that,
hmm
yeah, as someone who does a horror podcast and you go to like these horror conventions, you very quickly learn that there's like these Venn diagrams of things that just like
Yeah.
intersect with horror fans, and it's like wrestling, heavy metal music. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, and you kind of created like the ultimate center of that Venn diagram. Like, you
Oh
capture
man,
like
thanks.
that perfect blending of all of those shared interests that fans have. um I mean, I name dropped Dead Alive as well. I feel like
Yeah.
that's the top of the mountain, but obviously just like the splat stick
Yeah.
genre of the early 90s was a huge influence on this.
I mean, it's so funny because people keep talking about it being a throwback and stuff, but like to me, it's just like those are just like that's kind of all I watch. You know what I mean? Like, definitely, to a deficit to my health and mental health and whatever. Like, but that's just those are the kind of movies that I love. And that's always been kind of the North Star that I've been aiming towards is like, I mean, Freak to me is sort of the gold standard of like, it's so creative, it's so gross, it's so, I keep bringing up Mad Magazine. Like, it just reminds me of or Garbage Pail Kids, the sort of forbidden. When I was a kid, I would just see this stuff and I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I gotta
Yeah.
hide this from my mom. Um,
Well, Freaks
and
has that
so
weird
yeah,
thing where like I think everyone has this shared experience of no one had heard of this movie, and then you got like your free week of cable and it just happened to be on Cinemax or
yeah,
Showtime or whatever. And then you
exactly.
like tape it on VHS and show it to every friend and be like, you have to watch
Yeah,
this movie. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
yeah.
And this is going to be the streaming version of that. I think that this is going to be one
Oh
of those
man,
movies where I think it's going to do, really well Friday when it comes out. But then I
hmm
think it's going to be one of those situations where it just like doesn't die. You know what I mean? Like, there's
yeah.
tons of movies that are popular that first weekend,
Uh-huh.
everyone tunes in to watch it, and then like it kind of they move on. But I really think this is going to be a
Oh
movie that
man,
people
thanks.
keep wanting to show their friends and be like, you have to see this movie. It's crazy.
That was, I mean, you're quite perceptive. You should go. You should become a psychic medium and solve crimes, because you just, I mean, you get it. You're getting it 100%. Like, I mean, you talk about that Venn diagram, like that. Like, I'm right in the center of, it's like, I love horror, I love comedy, I love practical effects. Like, I love, all those things. And what was great about like working with Jonah and Alex as well is like, they come from, they have a lot of pull in the comedy world as well. So it's like, I knew that if I could bring in my bench of, comedian friends, into a movie, a Shudder movie, where they just haven't really had, I mean, at least to my knowledge, like,
they've had nothing like this.
Yeah, I haven't seen that world come in. Oh, and then obviously like the music world too.
Yeah.
So it was like, in many ways it was like calculated, but it's also like
it's just what you like, though.
Yeah.
when what you like just happens to add into the equation, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I love about the whole idea of exploitation movies is part of it is just like, all right, like, what do you got? What do you got around you?
Yeah. Well,
we got a giant T-Rex. Like, all right, let's make a movie.
Yeah, well, it's kind of why I've always made the argument that while he's not my favorite director of all time, I'll always argue that John Carpenter is the greatest director of all time, because I don't think that John Carpenter has ever made a movie that John Carpenter didn't want to watch. You know what I mean? Like, all of his stuff was so pulled from like, this is the movie I want to watch, and hopefully other people also want to watch it. And I think that that's the best way to make movies, is to have the fearlessness to just make the thing that you want to watch. Something that I thought was really funny with this movie is I'm definitely like the classic geeky cinephile that's like, I want to see it in a theater, or I want to own the Blu-ray. Like, watching it on streaming is kind of if that's the only place it's available, it's the only place it's available. And I really struggle with watching something on my laptop. Like, if I'm going to stream it, I want to stream it on the TV. I didn't have the capability to do that with the screener. And there's a scene in this movie where there may or may not be a talking skeleton. And there was a moment where I thought, shit, like, the sync is off on my thing. And then I was like, oh no, they're making a very smart joke about these 80s movies, like when you have a Return of the Living Dead and there's like the zombie woman talking, and the sync is like nowhere. It's just someone's just doing this and putting the words in later. I was like, this is so funny. Like, that became ultimately, anytime that skeleton spoke, I was like, this is the best part in the movie. It's so in the know of like these 80s do-it-yourself movies.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked at how like awesome the puppet came out. Like,
it looks great.
It's amazing. I mean, that's all Gabe Bartalos. But like, when we were talking through like, oh, how is Eleanor going to be represented? Like, is it going to be an actress like with like looking charred? And this was obviously I'm a huge Return of the Living Dead fan too. So there's just a big part of me that was like, what if it's just a skeleton, guys? And they're like, what? And I'm like, I don't know, like, just go get a skeleton from the Halloween store. And then sure enough, like, Gabe was like, no, I'll make it right. And he just totally did it up, and then had the animatronics, and like, for a lot of the shots I got to like do the eyebrow acting.
It looks so much better than any actor in makeup would ever look. Like, it really truly does. I think the joke works better. It's such a fun movie. I do want to talk about the music a little bit here, because obviously I'm from Philly, so I'm from the home of Man Man. Okay. So when I saw that association, I got really excited. And again, I'm texting my co-hosts of this podcast as I'm watching this screener, being like, dude, Friday, January 12th, you guys have to watch this movie. And one of my pitches was, I'm pretty sure John Daly is playing Les Claypool in this movie. It's like the pull of that like very unique prog metal, like almost power metal to a certain extent. And I guess that also ties in again with like Alex Winter, because it like the music that Jonah's character is creating throughout this movie feels very much like the next evolution, like what the 2024 version of what like Wild Stallions was trying to do in the Bill and Ted movies.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
just like how much further can you push this crazy guitar rock music?
Right.
It works so well. Where did you land on? How did you land on Man Man being the people that you wanted to work with on this?
I've known Ryan for a long time, you know, like just I just have this. He's just one of those guys that like I just have had an affinity for. Like, you know, I don't know him. I didn't know him super well, but it was like every time we'd see each other, we'd hug and we'd just talk about crazy movies and crazy whatever. And so early on, at the first iteration of the script, it was like with me and my buddy Charlie, we were, you know, again, we were like assessing what do we have to play with, and it's like, okay, like he had, you know, he had worked with Gabe Bartalo, so like maybe we could talk to Gabe, and then it was like Ryan. I was like, you know, I love the texture of, you know, the very Tom Waitsy stuff, and that was initially the beginning of it. It was just like, you know, I just love all the stuff in the hallway where it's just like, you know,
Yeah.
and I asked him early on. I sent him an email or something like, "Hey, if I ever get this movie made, would you want to do the music?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And then you know, fast forward 10 years, and you know, I had to hold him to it. But then you know, him and Brett Morris, who also did the music, like I don't know how they did it. I feel like it's the movie's like 90% has some form of music in it.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It,
Whether it's
yeah,
his music, whether it's Vlad's like over the top Russian techno music, or just
yeah,
general score. Like there's never not music happening in the
yeah,
background of this movie.
right. Which I might just be dumb. I don't know. You know, it's like you're watching a scene and you're like, oh, that should be sad. You have sad music? Like, yeah, we can do that. Okay, good. You know. But I don't know. Yeah, it was really important to me to have that texture and that vibe. And then I mean what's funny too is it's like I was like, hey man, you know, do you know Prague? He's like, oh yeah, of course I do, you know.
Yeah.
And there's like a big finale where there's a lot of music, and I had sort of like mapped out like, okay, there needs to be this kind of moment, there needs to be this moment, there needs to be a moment where it's, you know, very Jethro Tull out in the woods, like, you know, we need this other moment where it's just really funky. Or what's funny is like I had said, like, you know, we need a moment that's like Goblin, like the band Goblin.
Yeah.
And he took that to mean like the lyrics are about a goblin.
he's
There's a part
he's
where
not
Jonah's
seen a
just
lot
like,
of
I'm a
Argento movies.
goblin. Yeah. I'm like, well, I was kind of thinking more like Suspiria or something, but that's fine, you know.
That's so funny. But I want to talk about your music video making as well for a little
Yeah.
bit, because this movie is so immersed in prog and metal,
Hmm.
and it's clear you have a love for that. But also I've
Yeah.
watched a lot of your music videos because you did some videos for some pretty big songs that I don't
Yeah.
think really fall into the prog metal category in any way.
No, no.
But like you can't make a video as unique and interesting as like MTKO classic
Yeah.
and not have a love for that song and how catchy that
Right.
song is, and that love of pop music, which
Right.
weirdly in a lot of ways I feel like prog is the antithesis of pop music in every
Oh, totally.
possible
Yeah.
way. But like I'm someone who can listen to both, but that's very rare.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
usually if someone's in the prog, they're not going to be listening to Carly Rae Jepsen also.
Right.
Like that's
Right. Their ears are permanently it's like when you have like a ear gauge, ear hole or whatever, like
yeah.
your ears are just too stretched out. Like it's
Yeah.
they're,
The headphones don't
they're,
fit over anymore.
yeah, they're too full of solos and keyboard and stuff. Um yeah, I mean that was always part of the plan, was like, you know, when I was in film school, I you know, it's like I wanted to be making movies, but it's like, you know, how do I go from way down here to up there? Like I don't know how to do that. But then I saw folks like Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry and those, you know, I mean, these titans. But at the
Yeah.
time, I was like, oh, I could do that, you know. But it's like I could make a skate video with my friends, and then I could, you know, I could do a music video for these guys that I know, and so that was sort of the trajectory of the whole thing. And I feel like because I had to like flex so many different muscles and do different styles, like, oh, this is, more of a teeny bopper thing, oh, this is more romantic, oh, this is more scary. Like, I feel like I was able to really stretch and I don't know, just work out, pull all the tools out of the toolbox. So then when it's time to make a movie, it's like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. Like, oh, I can, so that's what I'm excited about too, is that like I've been making stuff forever. I just don't, not a lot of people have seen it, or they have seen it, but they didn't know that I made it. And so I
Yeah.
feel like this is a movie where it's both. It's like, if you didn't know who I am, I hope that you watch it and go like, holy shit, like what?
Yeah.
Where's this fully formed, air quotes, fully formed director come from?
Well, it's also kind of one of those things where, I mean, unfortunately, like you're having to do music videos after where it's almost a lost art form. Like
Yeah.
growing up in like the late 80s, early 90s with MTV, you were seeing some of the most unique short
Oh yeah.
films I've ever seen in my life were music videos. Like
Oh totally. Yeah.
those 90s grunge videos are literally what now, if you go to Fantastic Fest, feels like the short that plays before the main feature. You know what I
It's
mean? Like
true.
it's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
it was a really unique way for a filmmaker to make a short film that a much larger audience would see than if they had just made a regular short
Oh
film.
totally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
now that like pipeline is now just that video will only be seen if it's popular enough that people are looking it up on whatever other
Right.
streaming site. There's not like
Right.
a channel where it's playing 20 times a day anymore. But you've made some
Right.
heavy hitter song. I mean, one of
Oh
your
yeah.
first ones is Love Song from Sarah Bareilles. Like that's
Right. Yeah.
it's a pretty good one to come out the gate with.
Yeah. I mean, I had probably done like 4 or 5. Kind of difficult to count, but like I've done a handful of like smaller, like $5,000 budget videos.
Yeah.
And which then I was lucky enough to sort of attract this woman who was a music video rep. She used to rep Joseph Kahn, and she saw something in me, and that was the first big fish we snagged. And yeah, it's crazy. It really helped, and it was a ton of fun, and it is still like the one that I like. If I'm at a party and somebody's like, "What do you do?" I'm like, I hum a few bars of Love
Yeah.
Song, and they go, "Oh,
Yeah. You familiar with this song?
yeah."
This guy.
You ever been to a Bed Bath and Beyond? Yeah, that's what
So a question I love to ask any creator though is, do you remember what was like the movie or TV show or heck even music video that kind
Yeah.
of put it on your radar that this may be a career you would like to pursue one day?
Yeah. I mean, I think the one that like just really blew my mind was UHF.
Yeah. And
Which is
boy, is there a lot
insane
of
because
UHF in this movie too.
yeah, and Weird Al came to our premiere, which is insane.
Yeah.
Because Jonah knows him or whatever. I guess, or he just heard through the psychic vibes that I was sending out. But yeah, I mean, to me, like UHF, like that's sort of is like the Rosetta Stone of me. Like seeing again, it's like, I can't make maybe I could make Oppenheimer one day. Maybe I could make Oppenheimer. But like, could I make Conan the librarian? Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
could do that.
I
And
think
just
sometimes
the
all
way,
of us are chasing that. Like, because
yeah,
that's a movie that I've watched a million times. And every year with the podcast network that I run, we do a 24-hour charity stream for Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
oh yeah,
It's a program that's really important to me. And every single year we're like, this is our UHF for a day. Like this is like
yeah,
getting all of the hosts of these 20 different podcasts who are all like funny and they're filmmakers or they're musicians and just saying like,
yeah,
film a 20-minute segment and send it to me and I'll play it. It doesn't matter how weird it is or how like
right,
avant-garde it is. But there is something in it where it's like Weird Al made this movie about a guy doing whatever he wanted with a TV station, and I think every single creative person from that point on thought, man, what would I do if I could program my own TV
Oh
station?
yeah.
Or like,
Oh
what would I
totally.
do if
Yeah.
I could just make anything that my heart desired? Like,
Or even just like the low budget tricks he did, like, like I remember like getting a video, like when he does the Indiana Jones like head turn where his head goes all the way around. Like I immediately had to get it, like go borrow my friend's video camera and like make like can we do that? Can we make that? Um but yeah, I mean with that movie, like what I love about his stuff, that one in particular is just like it's so unpretentious. Like it's so like it just feels like a movie that invites you to come play. And I
yeah,
think
it's
all those movies that I love, like Evil Dead 2, had that feeling to me of like you could see the filmmaking within it, and it but it's not in a way that's trying to like be too cool for school. It's like, hey, did you know you can do this? You just run through the forest with a camera. Isn't that awesome? You know?
I truly believe that watching people have fun making a thing makes a thing more fun. And like as
Yeah,
a person who like loves like 90s teen flicks, it's like I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that like Can't Hardly Wait or Empire Records are like the greatest, most well-crafted scripts or films in the world. But you watch
yeah.
those movies and you're like, it is undeniable how much fun every single person on this production is having. And it
Oh,
becomes
totally.
infectious through the screen. And I,
Yeah.
to bring it back to Destroy All Neighbors, I feel that. Like you watch Destroy All
Yeah.
Neighbors and you're like, there is no chance in hell that this wasn't the most fun for everybody
Yeah.
doing it. You even have like Thomas Lennon in there that like just has he just looks like he's had more fun doing the whatever amount of
Yeah.
days it took for his scenes
Yeah.
than like
Yeah.
anything he's done in the last like 10 years. Like there's just
Yeah.
this joy that's exuding out of all of these people.
Oh,
And you've
yeah.
created a movie where like, you've got a guy who's killing people and you're still kind of just like, man, I hope he gets away with this because he's so
Right.
lovable. He's so
Yeah.
likable. Like,
Yeah, that was I remember like early drafts of the scripts and people saw it and they were like, "Oh, this character's not very likable." And I just always remember like Alexander Payne talks about that, about how like he's like a lot of likability is just in the casting,
yeah.
like Matthew Broderick in Election, like, is kind of a piece of shit, like, or he is a piece of shit, but
Yeah.
it's Matthew Broderick, and you want to go on the along, on that ride. And similarly, like, I mean, Jonah's character is pretty, despicable in so many ways, but it's like, at least from, I mean, I see myself in that character, probably more than I should admit, but like, you know, yeah, he's such a sweet guy, and I feel like you want to go on that ride with him. I don't know, it just feels like it's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode gone crazy.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a lot of fun. I would say another movie that if I'm trying to throw similar vibes out to convince an
Yeah.
audience to check it out, uh, without being anything like this movie, it gives me a lot of Gremlins 2, the new batch energy of
Okay.
just
Yeah.
like let's just like I love the story behind that of like the studio wanted the sequel so bad that Joe Dante was
Yeah.
able to work out a deal where it's like I get to do whatever I want and you can't tell me no. And like that's kind
Yeah.
of the feeling that I get watching Destroy All Neighbors is like it doesn't feel like anyone was telling you couldn't do something with it.
Yeah.
And it's
No.
great.
Yeah. That's exactly what happened. I mean, Shudder is so amazing in that way. Like I mean, I I think having Alex and Jonah, I think gave them so much confidence, that like, okay, these guys are gonna turn in a good movie.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, to their credit, they were just like, I mean, I'm sure that like we went, we went through the budget with a fine tooth comb and whatever, but like, they didn't. There were basically no notes. I mean, there were a few notes at the end, like, hey, this, whatever, maybe paste this scene up or whatever, but like yeah, I mean, to me what they're doing is not dissimilar from like, I don't know, like the golden age of like Roger Corman movies, or I don't know, like just the best aspects of exploitation movies, of just like, I don't know, just crank it out, kid. you
Yeah.
know
I mean, when I was done this movie, I decided that you're the person I most want to direct the movie I've dreamed of existing since I was a kid, which was the Zombies Ate My Neighbors movie. Like my
oh yeah.
favorite video game of all time. And I'm like, this is the energy. this is the energy, this
Oh,
is
thanks.
the way that someone should take that property and do something with it. And
Yeah.
obviously the name helps. I was like, destroy all neighbors, zombie ate my neighbors. Like, let's do this.
Right. Yeah.
Let's get Josh in the director's seat to make that happen.
Yeah.
But assuming that that's not as easy to get in touch with LucasArts and get the okay for that,
Right.
what is
Yeah.
next on the horizon for you, and where can listeners go to keep tabs on what you're up to
Right.
post this
Well, you
movie?
can always. I jumped off of Twitter. I
That's a good
exploded
move.
my Twitter because I just yeah. It's like I can't. But I am on Instagram as best Josh Forbes, because there are many others, but you know I'm the best. Or you know you can check out just my website joshforbes.com. But you know I have a documentary that I've been working on almost as long as the Neighbors movie. It's a doc about Gallagher, the comedian.
Okay.
Um, and so I followed him around for years, you know, all the way leading up to his passing. And so we have a movie that's pretty insane, pretty amazing. So that's in the pipeline. And then I don't know. I mean, I have a bunch of other scripts that are like kind of in a similar genre. There's a script called Sewer Babies that I'd like to do.
Sounds like a
Um,
trauma purchase right there to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's like Gremlins too, on a college campus, basically.
Love that.
Like over spring break, you know, this group of students has to survive the
It's
night.
Ghoulies 3. The Ghoulies go to college.
Exactly.
but watchable,
So
I'm assuming.
yeah, but yeah, but that's the thing, because I mean, I have a bunch of other scripts too that are more serious or more whatever. But like, I want to keep writing this. Like, I feel like I've hit a good stride with this feeling. And it's also after the screening we had the other night, it's like I'm like, why would anyone ever want to make a sad movie? Like, this is
Yeah.
so fun. Because the whole time everybody's just laughing and, you know, screaming and whatever. And it's like, yeah, I just want to I want to chase that dragon forever, you know.
Well, you've definitely got a newfound super fan in me after
Oh
watching
man,
this.
thanks.
So I'm ready for whatever comes next, and I'm sure all the listeners of Horror Movie Night will be as well. So it's on Shudder right now. Go check it out. Go watch it.
Yeah.
And you know, follow the best Josh Forbes and
Best Josh Forbes, yeah.
and let him know how much you loved it. Thank you so much for joining us, Josh.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Matt.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.